Welcome to another episode of the Tristen Law Show. I am Tristen Law, and we're back. We're back. This is episode number 6, number 7. Man, I'm losing count of how many episodes that I've been doing, how much live I've been going. Live has been working out for me. A lot of people are interested in me talking about pro wrestling, so I appreciate that. Right now, I have 51 followers, 51 subscribers on YouTube. And if you are watching this right now, I just want you to hit the subscribe button from the start. Just hit boom, subscribe to me so we can get to 100. And once we get to 100, we'll move the goalpost and then we'll go from there. But I need 49 more subscribers because I want to get to 100 subscribers. 100. I'm not asking for much. I'm only asking for 49 people. This podcast, this Tristen Law Show podcast thing that I do is also available on wherever you listen to a podcast. So if you don't want to see my face because you don't think I have the most prettiest, handsomest face, you can listen to me. Just go to wherever you listen to a podcast and type in Tristen Law Show. And if you're already here on YouTube, you can just listen on YouTube, because I have the podcast come here to YouTube as well too. You can do that as well too if you don't want to see my face. But the beard is nice, the cheeks are right, the face cheeks are right. So I'm glad that you're here. Today I'm going to be talking about the life of an independent pro wrestler. I'm going to be exposing the life of what it was like for me to be an independent pro wrestler. So if you want to be an independent pro wrestler, this is something that you might have to look forward to. This is just from my experience and how I did it when I was full-time independent wrestling. But the typical schedule that I had to do, my schedule was pretty hectic. Let me give you my schedule. Let's start with Monday. Monday, I would go to wrestling school, right? I would go to, I would go to ECPW, right? I would go there and I would go to train on Monday. And then on Monday night, I would go home and I would have to watch wrestling. Actually, let me start even earlier than that. Monday in the day, I most likely worked. 99% of the chance, I most likely worked. I worked at Walmart. And then after that, I would go to the pro wrestling school right from work. I would go to the pro wrestling school. After that, I would come home and then I would watch wrestling, right? The reason why I would watch wrestling is because later on in the week, there was some kind of podcast that I probably would have to do, or somebody would want me to guest on their podcast. Tuesday as well, I would go to work and I would go to wrestling school if I wasn't off. Wednesday, it's probably off Tuesday, Wednesday. Wednesday, there was no wrestling school, but I would always, that's the day I would use to edit or put together my podcast, my previous episodes, the previous seasons of my podcast. I would do it on Wednesday so it could be ready for the following Wednesday. Wink, wink. I always kept things in the can. And then Thursdays, I would go back to wrestling school and work during the day. Fridays would be the beginning of the long day. I would wake up early, go to work. After work, I would go to wrestle. After wrestling, I would come home, and then I would come home, wake up the next day, go to work, wrestle again, and Sunday would kind of be like my break day. I don't understand how I had any time for family or anybody else. I had met with my personal trainer, working out. Like, I was just a really busy guy. At one time, I had probably like 12 jobs at one time. So if you ask me, maybe people would say, oh yeah, you're really Jamaican. Yeah, I guess so. I had 12 jobs at one time. It might be 12. Let me count them out for you. I was a pro wrestler. I was a real estate salesperson. I was working at Walmart. I was a news reporter. I was a YouTuber. I worked on the radio, and I had a bunch of other jobs. I think I probably forgot some that I had now, but that was pretty much my schedule. When I was in the thick of it, when I first started wrestling, my diet was, I wouldn't say my diet was good. My diet wasn't the best. If you ask me, I think I had a little bit of an eating disorder way back in the day, because I wanted to get to WWE so bad. So all I would do is just eat rice cakes, and I would go to Subway and get the 6-inch Subway sandwich, and I'd probably just eat that. And when I feel hungry later on, I would eat rice cakes and drink lots of water. I would double scoop on protein, and let me tell you, protein farts stink. They stink real bad. So I would double scoop on protein and stuff like that. Rest, when it came to rest, I always said that sleep was for dead people. It was for dead people. I didn't sleep much. There'd be times when I'd be driving back home from a wrestling show that I would have to pull over to the side of the road just to sleep. There'd be times I would leave the house at 8 a.m. saying that I'm going to work and I wouldn't be back to my house or halfway to my house till maybe 3 in the morning. And then I would pull over, sleep, the sun would come up and I would go home, finish sleep for a little bit, for maybe another hour or two, and get ready to go to work and do it all again. It was strenuous. It was a part of the job, if you asked me. You know, this is just from my experience. Other independent wrestlers probably do it differently or have done it differently than I did. But balancing pro wrestling and family with other responsibilities, it was tough. It was really tough. And the way that I was trained, it was that wrestling first, everything else second. Is that the right way? I don't know. I guess at one time, I guess it made sense because you never knew if there was an opportunity that was for you, that you would give that opportunity away because you decided you want to go party with your friends. There was a long time that I didn't do any kind of partying. I didn't drink. I didn't do any of that. I didn't do anything. All I did was wrestle, did all my responsibilities, try to keep relationships with women, and then I would go wrestle again. So to me, trying to balance my life and stuff like that with pro wrestling, it was difficult, right? And it's something I did by choice because I was an independent wrestler. I wasn't signed to the WWE or AEW or anybody like that to where I had to be out on the road, but I wanted to be out on the road. Some of the mental and physical preparations that I would have to do for matches, definitely going to the wrestling school. Definitely got to go to the wrestling school. You know, for me, I always saw the wrestling school as the scientist lab. And what I would do in the scientist lab is that I would practice everything that I wanted to practice so that when I got to the show on the weekend, it looked right? So for me, I always tell up-and-coming pro wrestlers that you don't practice on a live show where people pay money. You don't do things in front of a live crowd that you are not 90% confident that you can pull off. I know because I've done it. I remember going to shows, trying things and pulling things off in the show and just falling flat on my face. Literally. Falling flat on my face because it wasn't something that I was good at, something that I hadn't perfect. So I would have to go to the wrestling school. I would have to meet with my personal trainer because like I talked about in the last episode, working out makes pro wrestling a lot easier. You know, there's different muscles that you get to use. You would have to jump, stop, skip on a dime. And my last personal trainer was the man. He was the man, and I highly recommend him if you're looking to lose little bit of weight or a lot of bit of weight. Right? His name is Maze. You could find him on Instagram at YorkFit. Good guy. You know, definitely helped me out. Him and my barber were the most two important people at one time. I always had to make sure I looked good because I was always somebody taking a picture of me or somebody was videoing me or the wrestling show had video, and I always had to make sure I looked good. Yeah, of course I was a big dude. You know, I was always a big dude because I like my food. I like my chicken wings with my blue cheese. I like them wet, naked, and hot. That's how I like my chicken wings, right? I love chicken wings. I love pizza and all that stuff, right? But it made me happy because that's why I formatted myself. I said, you know what? I want to look like a wrestler from the 70s or the 80s. You know, they weren't all that, well, maybe not the 80s, but maybe the 70s. They weren't like super muscular. I was muscular. I can go. Ask anybody that I ever got into the ring with. I can go. I can perform. I never let anybody down in the ring as far as I know when it came to performing and my abilities. Even though I was big, I could still go. Like I said last time, I couldn't run a marathon, right? But I could definitely wrestle for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and it's no easy feat to anybody who's never been into a ring before. Some of the workout trainings that I would do plyometrics, things that would involve me jumping from back and forth, just so I can get some of those jumping muscles strong, right? Because wrestling, yeah, the person is picking me up, right, to body slam me or whatever, but let me tell you the secret. I gotta jump. It's nothing worse than muscling some. Look. If someone was body slamming me, even if they were shaped just like me, okay, look, I'm not light. I'm not a feather. But I had to learn to be light on my feet. So it's all about where the timing comes in, that when they would pick me up for the body slam, I would just give them that big jump to give them that boost. And that's one of the things that I had to do to work out. I had to get my arms strong, right? Because I would have to do things to where I would have to throw myself down the ground or get slammed, and I would have to bring myself back up. I would have to get my legs strong as well, too. getting my legs strong was very important for me because you do a lot of running and a lot of stop and start in pro wrestling. Nothing that you can do in the gym though could replicate what you had to do. I think one of the hardest parts doing the whole pro wrestling part for me was staying motivated. When I first started doing it, I took myself way too seriously. And we'll talk about that later on in another episode. I have a whole episode in my mind that I have where I talk about me taking myself a little bit too seriously. But I took myself a little bit too seriously. And when I came back to wrestling, didn't take myself that much seriously. I had a little bit more fun. But my motivation was always entertaining the people. I know what it is like to go to work and put up with somebody that you don't like, and they're your boss, just for you to make $1. And for you to come to a wrestling show with you and all your wife and maybe your 3 kids and they want to bring a friend, that's a lot of money in tickets. That's a lot of hours of work that you have to put forth. Some people were putting up an hour, a half a day's worth of work. If you're going to a WWE show, most people are putting up a whole day's worth of work for one ticket. I always want to make sure that your money was always spent in the right place, that your money was never wasted. That was my motivation. My motivation was always going out there and making sure that you booed me and you cheered the other person. That was my job. I was the heel. I was the rudo, as they would say in Mexico. It was very important for me to be booed by you. It's very important for you to dislike me. And you know what? I always took pride in wanting somebody to slash my tires. Nobody ever slashed my tires, which is, I'm good. I'm happy for that. I always parked far away from the building so you couldn't tell which car I pulled up in, because even though I wanted you to slash my tires, I didn't want you to slash my tires. As crazy as it may seem, I wanted people to slash the tires because it means that I was able to suspend that disbelief in them so much that they hated me and thought that I was a really bad person. Most people that know me don't really think that I'm a bad person at all. The motivation as well too was hanging out with the younger crowd, right? I hung out with beautiful Buddy Thomas, who's an up and coming wrestler who I know will one day get to the WWE, and I always tell him that the day you get to WrestleMania, bro, I'll be there front row, ugly crying right next to your dad. Me and your dad will be sitting there, well, maybe not your dad, but I'll be sitting there ugly crying at WrestleMania because I remember when you came to me and said, I want to be a wrestler. And I was like, okay, kid, no problem. And look at you now. You're doing good, kid. And you were my motivation for me to go pick you up and drive you to the school, and you invigorated me. The importance of continuously learning new moves though while you're in the wrestling business is because you don't want to grow stale, right? For me, I always recommend, I never watched anything that was happening live and took moves from there. What I would do is I would watch old stuff. So I'd be watching things from the 90s. I'd be watching things from the 80s and seeing how they did things and putting a new spin on that. And it was important for me because it kept myself, with a lot of tools in my tool bag, for the lack of a better term. But one of the things for me is that you don't need a lot of moves. Surprise. A lot of people used to hate John Cena because John Cena only had the 5 moves of doom, right? And you only really need to go out there and just play your hits, especially if you're well known. And I would go out there and I would my matches pretty much consisted of body slams, throwing people, using this big old noggin that my mother gave me or my father gave me. I don't know who had the bigger head, but I would use my head. I would punch, I would stomp. I was really pretty basic. And the kind of people that I loved wrestling were smaller people because I always felt that I'd be a good base, because they like to flip and I like to catch them and I have no problem taking a bump from them. I never forget the one time I wrestled this one wrestler, Junior Flow, right? He has a zombie gimmick and he wrestles for ECPW. And the guy did a a flip or whatever on top of me and landed right back onto his feet. So like it's because of how I bumped and how I did things. But staying motivated through the tough training sessions. Pro wrestling training is not easy at all. It's hard. We would go to the pro wrestling school, let's say ECPW. That's the last one that I went to. That was my home that I went to after my original one. Well, my second pro wrestling school, BWO, closed. And we would have people that would come from the WWE because, believe it or not, a lot of people have come through the doors of East Coast Pro Wrestling. A lot of people. A lot. People that you wouldn't even imagine have come through those doors. Nunzio. I could just sit here and name names forever, but that's not the point. A lot of people have come through those ECPW doors, and they would come through to the school, and they would help us with drills and different things like that. And the drills that they were doing with us were some of the drills that they'd be doing at a WWE tribe. We'd have Sonny Kiss, who wrestled in AEW. He was part of the inaugural team wrestling crew in the inaugural roster of AEW, All Elite Wrestling. He would come back and show us drills and different things like that. And it's tough. It's hard. And if pro wrestling was hard, it was easy. If pro wrestling was easy, anybody can do it, but it's not easy. And that's why everybody can't do it. So the motivation for me was that, yeah, I am the OG, I guess, right? Because a lot of people didn't have as much time. There was a couple of us in the locker room that were OGs based on our generation. Me, in the ECPW locker room. Me, Prince Akhenaten, Frankie Flo, Andrew Anderson. There are a couple of us guys that have been around, and depending on who's been there the longest, they're the OG. So at the times, I was the OG, and I couldn't make the little kids, the younger wrestlers, look at me and go, oh, wow, look at him. He's old. Nope, ain't nothing old about me. Even though a couple minutes ago when I went to go plug in the lights, I went, ooh, my back. All right, so let's talk about what happens before a wrestling show. We're going to talk about what happens during and what happens after. So before the wrestling show, we're going to say that the show starts about maybe, let's go with 6 p.m. Let's say the show starts at 6. No, let's say it starts at 7. All right, and we know that most independent wrestling shows don't start on time. I think it's a bad habit by independent pro wrestling promoters to not start on time, right? But I would have a soft time and a hard time. For me, when I do this podcast, my hard time is like I always say I start at 12, but I do the countdown, the 3 minutes to get everybody there that wants to come in and watch the live stream. So I usually start at 12:03. So let's say the pro wrestling show starts at 7 with a hard time of when it really starts at like 7:15, right? You got a lot of talking, a little gaga in the beginning. But before that, the ring would have to be put together. I was a part of ring crew for Gino Caruso and ECPW for a very long time. When it came to putting together the ring, that's how I earned my stripes with him, driving that ring truck throughout the city of New York or upstate or New Jersey or wherever it is that he just needed the truck driven to. If it was me, it was me. Hopefully there'd be other people there to help me unload the ring. Unloading the ring, we would have to unload the 4 posts. There's 4 posts in each corner. And then you would put there's these large buckets that they go into like little hooks on the side of the ring post. Each end is 2 on each side. So you would put 1 here, 1 there, and 1 on the far end. And then after that, you would have to load the wood onto the ring. After the wood, then you would put padding because nobody wants to bump on wood. And after the padding, you would put the canvas. After the canvas, you'd put on the ropes. You tighten the ropes, and the last thing you would put on is the apron, the one that says the name of the company on the side. And after that, you would probably just put the stairs if stairs were available. That's what we would do. We would get to the building. If I wasn't a part of the ring crew and I wasn't able to get out of work early, I know the show started at 7. I would try to get there like between 5 and 6, depending on how far I was coming from work. Because remember, I still had a regular job that was a commitment as well, too, that I had to make. So I would come to the wrestling show, let's say 5 or 6, come in. Maybe I'm not on an advertised match, but I know that I'm booked. I'm booked knowing that I'm supposed to be there, but I don't know who I'm working. I would wait for the promoter to come in. If the promoter's not there already, the promoter would write down a run sheet on a piece of paper, and he'd put the match card up. And on the match card, he or she, usually he would put who is wrestling who, how much time you have, and if you're going over winning, or if you're putting somebody over losing. So one of the things is, okay, so you would wait, see who you're wrestling. You would go to the person, and then you would talk to them and say, hey, look, depending on who it is. If I was wrestling somebody that had time in the business, what I would do is I would let them dictate the match. Instead of me coming out there as the young boy telling them what I was going to do, I would go out there and let them tell me what they wanted to do. And hopefully they would take my suggestions if they would ask me. But if they didn't ask for any suggestions, I always say things like, hey, I have this headbutt thing that I do. I would like to get that headbutt in. Or, whatever it is that I used to like to get in, that's what I would get in the point of telling the story. Sometimes they would ask, hey, kid, what can you do? That's what I would ask somebody who was brand new. I said, hey, what can you do? When the roles were turned, I would actually ask the younger wrestlers, hey, what can you do? Because when I know what you can do, I know what kind of match I can put together for us to go out there. After the match is put together, let's say I'm not wrestling until like the middle of the card. So even though the show starts at 7:15, I probably won't be wrestling until 8. So now it's like 5:30, right? We already put together the basis of our match. Now we separate, right? We separate. You go sit in your corner with your friends if that person's not in your circle. You get dressed. You BS. For some people, and never me, for some people, backstage at a wrestling event was a party for them. That's when they smoked weed or did other drugs, or some people would drink. And for me, I was never in the business of doing that because I always treated pro wrestling as work. It was always work for me, right? Work first, play later. If I was going to have a beer, because remember, I always had to drive, right? And I don't play with my driver's license at all. If I was going to have a beer, one singular beer, it would be right after my match. Give me enough time to cool down, relax. I would drink some water and I would go. Okay, and I would go about my business, but never doing it. Some people play cards. We used to play Uno. Some people play video games. I've been to places where they play video games. Or some people just sit around, they talk and they BS, and they talk about, hey, brother, what show you working this weekend? I'm not booked. Can I ride with you? With you as a big networking thing. If you're one of the persons that are walking into the locker room, this is pro wrestling etiquette. Listen to this. If you're one of the persons walking into the locker room, and everybody else is already there, you come in and you shake every single person's hand, okay? Nobody doesn't go without getting a handshake, especially if you're on the show, you call yourself a wrestler, you shake everybody's hand. Some people get hugs, some people are more bros than others, but you're always professional, you're always doing business. The first thing in pro wrestling is pro. Pro is short for professional. You'd walk in, you shake everybody's hand. Hey, brother, how's it going? Good to see you. If I know who you are or I follow you on Facebook or Instagram, hey, how's the kids? How's the this? How's the that? Or somebody who I haven't seen in a while, hey, look, man, it's really glad to see your face. I'm glad that you're here. Those are messages that I would tell towards people. So now everybody else is going through their match and stuff like that, and then now it's your turn. So what I like to do, because I love wrestling, is that I would watch at least a couple of the matches before me. If I wasn't first. The first match, there's 3 places I always want to be in a wrestling show. 3. The main event, obviously. The first match, or the match, 4. The match before intermission, or the match after intermission. If you've never been to an indie show, independent pro wrestling show, the intermission is the break in the middle of the wrestling show to give everybody a break, stretch your feet, go buy popcorn. You're not missing anything if you go walk around, go smoke, go talk on the phone, whatever. Let me tell you why. I like to be in the beginning, the first match, or the match before. I want to be in the first match because I set the tone for the entire night. I was the first chapter of the story for the night. Okay. I like to be also the match before intermission because I am the last sentence in the chapter in that part for the day. Okay, so when you go to intermission, you go, damn, that first semi-main event was good. I wonder what else the show has to offer. Boom, that's where it comes in the first match after intermission. I like it for the same exact reason that I like being first. I am the first match after the action stops. And main event, I love being in the main event because I was the one that sent everybody home happy or sad because I was the heel. And if I won, I sent a lot of people home sad. I never forget wrestling a main event with a guy. And the guy told me that, I just want to go out there. We just want to do 5 minutes. I was like, 5 minutes? Everybody waited all day for us. And we're going to go out there and just wait 5 minutes? We were the 2 biggest heads on the poster, mine being bigger. And you want to go out there and only do 5 minutes? disappointing. I didn't have any time on the job, so I couldn't really like, dispute that. But we went out there, we did our 5 minutes, but when I went out there to do the main event, I gave you one hell of a main event. So let's say I'm not first, I would be, let's say I would do the third match. I would go out and I would watch the matches. The reason why I would watch the matches is because you don't want to go out and be giving the people that paid their hard-earned money the same exact show, right? If they seen a powerbomb to end the first 2 matches because those people obviously didn't watch the matches before them, right? I don't want to go out there and be the other person that gives you another powerbomb or another super kick to, transition into the match. Or I don't want to be another match to where, we start fighting in the crowd, where every match started fighting in the crowd. That's not something that I was ever really interested in. I was more interested in being different, being unique on the show. The match would go on. We would wait right before the show goes on. Before the match goes on, we'd go out and we'd run over the match again, see if there's anything that we want to change, any ideas that you want to do and stuff like that. And then we'd wait our turn. There was one time I had a blindfold match with a guy named Orlok. That's his wrestling name. He was a vampire dude, and we had a blindfold match. And I always said that was the best match he and I ever had together. I didn't know how the hell I was going to do a blindfold match, but what I did was, during that time when we were talking about the match, I said, give me a second. I sat in the corner and I watched a blindfold match on YouTube just to have an idea of what to do. And I think I pretty much ripped off the whole entire match. And I think that was probably the best match. We had a really good reaction from the crowd. But either way, you go, you reconvene, see what you want to do. If anything's changed, you go it over, make sure everybody's on the same page. If there's anything you need to smarten, wrestling term, you need to smarten your referee up. Anything that you're doing that the referee needs to know, what you do is that you let them know at that point. And then you go out and you have your match. Usually the heel comes out first, so I would come out first. They would boo the hell out of me. I would get inside the ring. The babyface, I might cut a little promo, tell them the best thing that ever happened to them was for me to show up here today, and I'm glad that they found their teeth and they put on the cleanest, dirtiest T-shirt that they have. The babyface would come out, they would cheer them, we put on the match. The babyface would win. I would leave, and they would cheer. I would get on the mic and tell them that I'm never coming back here again, and they would cheer me because I said I was never coming back, and they hate me, and I would leave, and that'd be the match. After that, I think the hardest part about the match is the adrenaline dump. You're sitting there, you don't know if you're hurt or anything like that, or if you're banged up or anything like that, but that adrenaline dump, it's serious. It's serious. I would sit there. I always hated being the main event because the anxiety was so bad, but I always hated being the main event as well, too, because I would have to wait for the adrenaline to dump. I would have to sit there and just relax, drink water, talk about the match with the opponent. The promoter may want to come talk to you about the match. Somebody might saw the match, might want to give you an attaboy. One thing that I always did was I always had somebody watch my match so that they can come back and tell me how I did, just to give me some kind of feedback. But that's what I always did. And after the wrestling show, you'd always stay till the end. You'd help clean up, and then we'd all go home together. Interacting with fans, I never interacted with fans really because I was always the heel. I never wanted people to be like, oh my God, he's such a nice guy. And that's happened before, so I never wanted that to happen. Interacting with the promoter, interacting with a promoter, depending on the level of comfort with them, some promoters were like my friend. I always saw Gino Caruso as a father figure. So yeah, I always saw him as a father figure, or different promoters. You saw him as your boss. You just kept it a straight business with them. They would let you know if they got you booked for anything else. They'd see, if you were available for another show. When it comes to interacting with the wrestlers, to be honest, you're not friends with everybody. And that includes even the people that you were in the ring with. I know 100% there were pro wrestlers that didn't respect me. Why? Because I looked the way I looked, right? But I still worked. I still worked hard, right? I wasn't brolic or anything like that. I didn't look like I took wrestling seriously, but I took wrestling as seriously as I could in the parameters of my life, right? And a lot of wrestlers, I gained their respect by going inside the ring and doing the best with them, putting on the best matches for them. But some wrestlers, we don't get along, but we get in there and we still wrestle. It's business. And some wrestlers, you get along real well, that you're sitting there, you're palling together, you probably talk on the phone, text during the week, or whatever it would be. Setting up, breaking down the equipment, that was definitely a part of the show. That was something that we would do after the show. That includes cleaning the locker room. Yep, everybody used to just have to police themselves. That's why I would say, police yourselves. If you police yourselves, it's not much of a mess. Your wrist tape, don't throw your wrist tape in the corner. Don't pick, your water bottle. Bring your water bottle with you and stuff like that. The experience of traveling for shows, it was fun. I loved traveling on the road for shows. One of my first big travels was the BWO crew. We used to travel over to EGW in, I think it's called the Anthracite region of Pennsylvania. That's where we used to go. And we used to pile up in our trainer, fellow wrestler slash BWO head trainer, Richie Rotten. He had a minivan. So we'd all pile into the minivan. We'd pay him $5 in gas. And we all went over to the show, and we'd all wrestle together. I never forget, I was a little hip at the time in like 2011, 2012, and Nicki Minaj came on, and I never forget, somebody said, "Who's Nicki Minaj? What's the big deal about her?" And I showed them the picture of her booty cheeks, and they go, "Oh, wow, okay, now I understand of what's going on." But in the wrestling, in the wrestling business, the car is where we talked shop. That's where we talked about all the things that happen in wrestling, or if we knew that we were working each other that night, we would put together matches, and different stuff like that. I think one of the favorite parts was riding in the car with the boys. Funny story, I was thinking about it earlier when I was thinking about, what's a story I can tell? There's a story that me and my friends, I think it was me, Dan Murdoch, Ray Mars, Dan Murdoch, Steve Off, Ray Mars, and Darius Carter. We were actually riding. I don't think Darius was there that time. He might have been, might not have been. But either way, we were riding down to NWA in West Virginia. So we'd meet up in Jersey, and we'd all drive down and go to do this NWA show. And one time, we were coming back, and we got pulled over. Ray was driving. The cops wanted to give him a ticket. So we tried telling him, "Hey, tell him that you're a wrestler. Tell him that you're a wrestler. Tell him the car pillar wrestler." They didn't care. They had no care. Steve's dad was involved with the police department, so we showed the PBA card. Didn't matter. They still gave him the ticket either way. But that's how it went when it came to wrestling on the road. We just had a lot of fun on the road. It was just a cool time. The rule was if the driver's awake, everybody's awake. That was a rule that we had. Some of the when it came to getting a room, we don't do what you call heal a room. What you do is they usually let 2 to 4 people stay in a room, but I think one time we packed maybe 6 or 7 people in a room one time. Just 2 people go get the key, and then everybody else just comes in later on, and we'd all just be in the room, just sleeping. Look, 2 guys would sleep in the bed together, head to foot maybe, or I don't think anybody would want to sleep next to my feet, because sometimes I had Godzilla claws. Some people had a blow-up mattress. It all depends. We just were looking for a place to sleep for the night. Some of the challenges that we faced driving on the road was pretty much the payment. Like there was a time that wrestling was just so oversaturated and it wasn't popular. This was maybe from like 2009 to 2013. Wrestling was not as popular as it was before during the Attitude Era, or as popular as it is now. So we'd go to West Virginia. We weren't making much money. We make enough just to put gas in the car. They would pay for our hotel, and they would pay for our dinner after the show. After the show in West Virginia, we would go to, we were in towns like Beckley, West Virginia, in that area there. And they would pay for us to go to eat. I think we would go to either IHOP or Denny's. I can't remember what it was, but fans would come and meet us in this little town in West Virginia that we aired on the local Fox. So people would come to hang out with the wrestlers, to come, talk to us and get our autographs. And I thought it was pretty cool. In a small town on the Fox affiliate down there, and we were like the biggest things in the town. But definitely some of the challenge that we always made was making money. So what we'd always do, we would just fill a car. If I was driving, which I always drove most of the time, I would just fill my car right before I pick up the first person, or right when we were getting ready to hit the road. I would fill my car up, and from there, once it's time to refuel, everybody just pitches in for whatever it costs to refuel. I'd always thought it would never be fair for me to show up with in an empty tank, but that's pretty much how we managed it. Some of the injuries that I had when I was wrestling, I had rotator cuff injuries. I never forget, it's in your shoulder, a rotator cuff injury, and when you sleep on your shoulder, it feels like somebody's shooting you in the arm. And I remember going to the doctor, and the nurse was asking me, she goes to me, "Hey, how did you get hurt?" And I told her, "Hey, I was a pro wrestler, and somebody dropped me on my shoulder." And she goes, "Can I ask you a question?" I said, "Yeah, of course you can." She goes, "Is pro wrestling, fake?" And I go, I said, "Of course it is." I said, "I'm actually here pretending because I'm not really hurt." I said, "Look, honestly," I said, "that's a disrespectful question to ask a pro wrestler. Is it fake? Especially if I'm sitting here telling you that I'm hurt." right? I said, I'm not pretending to be hurt. I said, there are things that we do that you couldn't do in normal life. I said, but we do it in very safe ways. I said, but I'm legit hurt. I've had knee problems. At the beginning of my last run, it was so bad that I couldn't walk upstairs. But what saved my life was DDP yoga. And I always recommend DDP yoga for strengthening all those small little muscles. After a while, I'm telling you, I couldn't run up the stairs. I couldn't walk up the stairs. It hurt so badly to walk up the stairs. But doing DDP yoga, it strengthens some of the muscles, and I'm able to walk upstairs today, and I don't have any issues. I dislocated this pinky right here. I don't know if you could see if they're like different, but this one here, wait, no, did I dislocate this one? No, I dislocated this one here, because you could tell this one here is kind of straight, and this one here is kind of like, like crooked here, but I dislocated that pinky. I dislocated it 3 times. I dislocated the first time catching somebody off the top rope. The second time I dislocated it, I was wrestling, but the second and third time that I was wrestling, and it just moved. I just did something crazy. All I did was the first time I tried to pop it back in, I couldn't. And they tell you that after something dislocates, it's going to dislocate forever. And what I did was I just popped it back in quickly. Those are some of the injuries that I had. But definitely keeping that regular job was important for me, because I always made sure I had good health insurance in case I need to go to the doctor to get something taken care of. Engaging with fans and at the shows and online, I always said, hey, look, I never really interacted with the fans that much, but online, I would always act like they always say act like where you want to be, because, people see where you want to be. So I'd always act like I was a bigger star than I was with the fans. I don't know if it was the right thing to do, but, it always make them see me in a different light, to like, oh, wow, I can see this guy in the WWE. That was something that I did. Definitely a memorable fan reaction that I had is there was this person at one of the wrestling shows, and they would always show up. You could tell that they're special needs, that they're on the autism spectrum or whatever it may be, and they would dress up as the Undertaker, and I would always sit down and give that person a little bit of time, just talk to them and stuff like that, because even though I was the heel to them, I was still their form of entertainment. I was probably something that they may never have the opportunity to do. So, like, who am I to, do that to them? But anybody else, it was definitely off limits. When it comes to the business side of pro wrestling, negotiating pay, I always say I learned how to be a better negotiator because of pro wrestling. I learned that in negotiations, somebody has to give and somebody has to get. In the term of negotiation, at the end of the day, you have to give, but at the end of the day, feel like you didn't give a lot. And you have to get, even though the person that's giving feel like they didn't give a lot. I never forget, I was wrestling a show, and it was in Jersey, and it was supposed to be like on iPay-per-view. That was before like pay-per-view on the internet. It was doing around that time, maybe 2012, 2013. And the promoter said they want to book me, and they want to pay me $25. I always said, if you called me, you were at my mercy. And if I called you, I'd be willing to be at your mercy. So he called me and said, hey, I want to give you $20. I told the number. I want to give you $20 to drive from New York to Jersey City, New Jersey to come do this wrestling show. And I'm like, yeah, brother, that's not going to work for me. So, we negotiated down the pay, and he's like, well, nobody on the show was getting more than $20. So I looked at the show, and I saw Christopher Daniels, who wrestles for AEW right now, who was wrestling for TNA around the time. I said, I know that Christopher Daniels was making way more than $20. So you're not going to tell me that you're going to pay me $20 at the time to go on the show. So eventually, we negotiated, it was a $60 payday. That was my biggest payday at the time. I was only actively wrestling for 3 years. I wasn't making that much money wrestling. I would just make gas money or whatever, but I was able to negotiate $60 out of him, and that was perfect. That filled my car with gas that I spent, and it gave me something to eat, and I had a little bit of extra money to leave over. The way we work with bookings, if you want to get booked, what I would do is I would reach out to promoters, or some promoters would come to the show and watch the show, and they would take wrestlers from there. Or you would just reach out to a promoter, show them some videos and stuff like that, and hope that they like you enough. But sometimes it's all about who you know in the pro wrestling business, right? And it shows that when you show up to the pro wrestling show and trying to get booked, it shows that you actually care, that you actually want to be here. Managing my personal brand and marketing myself, I think that was always the toughest part. When I was young in pro wrestling, I didn't really know how to market myself. I thought t-shirts were nice, but I had t-shirts, but what I know now, I should have put a little bit more oomph into the t-shirts. When I was a younger wrestler, it's all about marketing me. So somewhere in the world, somebody has a Tristen Law t-shirt from like 2011, 2012 that they probably cut into pieces that they probably used to, wipe windows with. I don't know, but they paid for it. But managing my personal brand is something I definitely understand now, especially as far as it comes to the Tristen Law Show. No, Tristen Law is not my real name. People say, why don't you ever use your real name? I said, honestly, when you Google Tristen Law, you find stuff on the internet. When you Google my regular name, I guess as a regular person, I'm a nobody. I'm really a nobody as a regular person. So I've built equity behind the name Tristen Law. So that's my brand. And that's what I use. I use it for, when I worked on the radio, I called myself Tristen Law. Because if you want to Google me, you could go, let me see what the hell this Tristen Law guy. Oh, he's a wrestler. He's a this, he's a that. When we're done, Google me. Google me. I never forget my friends letting me know that I was Googleable. My friend would show me a screenshot. Dude, you're on Google? And it's Google my name. I go, oh crap, I didn't know I was on Google. But yeah, I was on Google. Long-term career planning and transitioning out of wrestling, I knew 100% that I couldn't wrestle forever. I knew it was something that I wasn't going to be able to do. And what I started doing was looking more at the entertainment side. I started looking more at podcasting, being on the radio was something that I always wanted to do, and I always thank my mother because she gave me a face for radio, a face that nobody wants to really see. But hey, we're sitting here on this podcast now, and you're looking at my face, and maybe you like it, or maybe you don't. Hey, it's up to you. But, I always thought about getting into the radio, getting to the entertainment side. There's a time that doing my last run, I realized that, they're not hiring many, almost 40-something-year-olds to be pro wrestlers in the WWE. You got to be something special. And then again, it comes to the whole confidence thing. Maybe I wasn't really anything special, but at almost 40 years old. So, what I did was I focused on maybe I can get a behind the scenes job. If I can get a job editing a podcast, hosting a podcast for the WWE, AEW, or somebody like that, I would have been okay. I would have been okay because, I still get to be around the business that I love. Yeah, I've worked at Walmart. Walmart was never my passion. I never had any other passion other than pro wrestling. I learned to be a firefighter. I was a firefighter. I loved it. Was it a passion? Not as big as wrestling was. I can't get rid of wrestling. Me and wrestling have a very dysfunctional relationship to where I can't get rid of wrestling, and I don't think wrestling can get rid of me. I enjoy sitting here talking about wrestling to you and talking about my previous career and what I plan to do in the future, but now I'm a dad. That's something I want to transition to as well too. I knew that I couldn't be a dad at 24 years old. Why? Because I was so busy running the country trying to be a pro wrestler. I think that I'm at the perfect age now to be a dad because I don't have any interest to go far. If I'm wrestling right now, I would wrestle maybe close to the New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Connecticut area. That's where I would be interested in wrestling. But if WWE was paying me, or AEW or TNA or somebody to host a podcast, or my professional job was hosting a pro wrestling podcast or editing or producing a pro wrestling podcast, you know what? I would definitely do a little bit of traveling for that because it's work. It's not a second job like pro wrestling was. But yeah, that was my, that's what it's like, exposing my life of being an independent pro wrestler. This is just from me. This is just from my recollection from how it was for me. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I answer to all the messages, whether they're good, bad, or ugly. You can follow me on Threads at The Real Big Trish. I want to shout out my brother for consistently, I think my brother's a little producer because he's the one that keeps telling me episode ideas and things that I should do. And I run things by him. Why? Because he's not a wrestling fan. And he watches, and he thoroughly enjoys this. And I encourage my brothers and my friends and family, and even you, if you're not a pro wrestling fan and you stumbled upon here, or you're a hardcore pro wrestling fan, I appreciate you telling me, your feedback. I started putting chapters in the episode because of one of my friend Dave. He said, hey, why don't you put chapters? Because you talk about a lot of things that are interesting. Why don't you put chapters so somebody can go back later on and listen? So I put chapters on each episode so that people could listen. I appreciate him. I appreciate my brothers, and I appreciate you. I'll be back on Friday. Friday, we'll do another pro wrestling centric episode here on the Tristen Law Show. We're going to be talking about the evolution of video games in pro wrestling. Now that I said it, it's going to happen. I'm calling it Pixels to Power Bombs. You're going to be able to watch that here on Friday at noon. And if you're not able to watch it at Friday at noon, you could always watch any of my episodes on demand in the Season 3 folder here on YouTube. I appreciate you to listen to the Season 3. Just forget about the old past episodes. Like, I cringe to see the quality of what I did and what I'm doing now. But watch them. If you had a little bit of time, why not go through my whole entire thing? And if you're listening to this on the audio-only version podcast, you're late. You're late. Watch me live on YouTube. That's where I want you to be. Thanks so much for joining me. I'm Tristen Law, and I'm looking forward to being with you on Thursday. And thanks for watching. See you next time.